The day started like any other, with the soft golden light of morning spilling into the kitchen, illuminating the familiar scent of breakfast and the gentle hum of life that had always felt so safe. But safety is a fragile thing, often taken for granted until it is abruptly stripped away, leaving a hollow echo where comfort once resided. She had no inkling that this morning would be different, no sense that the world she had meticulously built for her daughter, for herself, and for the life they shared, was about to fracture in a way that nothing could repair easily. The house, which had always felt like a sanctuary, a haven of laughter, memories, and small joys, was about to become the stage for a reality so raw, so irreparably sharp, that it would sear itself into the deepest corners of her heart. Her daughter had always been perceptive, a quiet observer of the world, her small eyes taking in far more than her words revealed. There had been subtle signs over time, moments when she seemed to sense more than she could understand, when her innocent questions hinted at an awareness of things not spoken aloud, but today was different. Today, that awareness would take the form of a revelation so direct, so impossible to ignore, that it would leave an indelible mark on both their lives. She remembered the way her daughter's footsteps faltered, light and hesitant at first, as if the air itself had grown heavier. The sound, which once brought a sense of comfort, now carried a tension that made her heart tighten. Curiosity, mixed with a vague unease, drew her attention to the living room, where the day's light seemed to catch in a way that highlighted the familiar shapes of the furniture, now transformed into witnesses to a moment that would redefine everything. And then she saw him, or rather, she saw the truth she had been afraid of acknowledging, the evidence of betrayal that her heart had subconsciously sensed but had refused to confront. He was there with another woman, the intimacy between them unmistakable, a cruel mimicry of the love and attention that had once been reserved exclusively for their family. The sight struck like lightning, instantaneous and blinding, leaving her momentarily frozen, caught between disbelief and the undeniable clarity of what her eyes were revealing. Her mind raced, scrambling for explanations, for any rationalization that could make this surreal tableau less devastating, but there was none that could erase the raw reality of the scene before her. Her daughter, small and fragile, yet impossibly perceptive, had witnessed it all. She had seen the closeness, the whispered words, the laughter shared with a warmth that should have been reserved for her mother alone. The girl's innocent gaze held a complexity that no child should ever have to carry, a depth of understanding born not of experience but of observation, a painful recognition that the world could harbor deceit and betrayal, even in the spaces where love should have been absolute. And then, as if compelled by a force greater than fear, she whispered a truth that pierced the air with the precision of a knife. Words so small, so seemingly fragile, yet imbued with a devastating clarity. Words that shattered the illusion of safety, exposing the fragile scaffolding of trust on which their lives had been built. In that instant, time seemed to distort. Every sound, the tick of the clock, the distant hum of the refrigerator, the soft rustle of curtains, faded into insignificance compared to the pounding of her own heart. She wanted to move, to intervene, to shield her daughter from the knowledge she should never have borne, yet her body betrayed her. She was rooted to the spot, trapped between the impulse to confront and the paralyzing fear of what confrontation would bring. Each heartbeat seemed amplified, echoing in her chest like a drumbeat of dread, as the reality of the discovery unfolded with relentless clarity. The emotional impact was immediate and overwhelming. Anger surged first, sharp and consuming, directed at the man she had trusted, at the fragile promises that now lay in ruins, at the audacity of someone who could step into their lives and taint the love she had believed to be sacred. Then came sorrow, a deep, aching sorrow that seemed to seep into every corner of her being, filling her chest with a weight so heavy that it made it hard to breathe. There was a profound sense of loss, not just of the fidelity she had expected, but of the innocence of her family, the unspoken security of their shared life, and the fragile illusion of happiness she had nurtured with such care. Her daughter, sensing the intensity of her mother's reaction, instinctively clung closer, her small hand seeking comfort in the familiar warmth of maternal touch. But even in this simple gesture, there was an unspoken understanding, a recognition that the world as they had known it had shifted irrevocably. The bond between mother and child, always resilient, now became the sole anchor in a sea of emotional turbulence, a reminder that even in the face of betrayal, love could persist in its quiet, steadfast way. The psychological reverberations extended far beyond the immediate moment. She could feel the impact of this discovery rippling through her thoughts, her memories, and her perceptions of the past. Every shared smile, every tender touch, every seemingly ordinary conversation came under scrutiny, reinterpreted in the harsh light of truth. Doubt seeped in like a shadow, coloring her recollections with questions that demanded answers she was not yet ready to confront. How long had this been going on? What signs had she missed? How had the life she had meticulously built allowed space for such deception? The questions themselves became a form of torment, as relentless as the memory of that fleeting, heart-wrenching glimpse of her husband with another woman. Yet, amidst the turmoil, there was a strange, almost paradoxical clarity. The shock, painful as it was, forced an awareness that had long been buried beneath layers of routine, habit, and hope. It illuminated truths that could no longer be ignored, stripped away illusions, and demanded a confrontation with reality that had been postponed for too long. In this way, the shocking discovery, though devastating, became a catalyst for change, a moment of unmasking that, however painful, revealed the raw, unvarnished landscape of their family's emotional terrain. The house, which had once been filled with the soft rhythm of ordinary life, now seemed to vibrate with tension, every room echoing the weight of the revelation. Each corner held memories that were suddenly tainted, each familiar object a silent witness to the fracture in their lives. She could feel the psychological space of her home shift, as if the very walls were aware of the intrusion, of the betrayal, of the irreversible change that had taken place within their hearts. Through it all, her daughter's presence was a grounding force. The child's honesty, though painful, was also a lifeline, a reminder that even in moments of betrayal and heartbreak, there existed a form of purity and truth that could not be corrupted. Her whispered words, the catalyst of this upheaval, carried with them a power that demanded acknowledgement, forcing the mother to face what she had long feared but could no longer deny. And so the day unfolded, marked by the quiet, relentless awareness of a reality that had intruded into their lives unbidden, reshaping their world in ways both immediate and long-lasting. The shocking discovery, witnessed through the eyes of her child and experienced through the heart of a mother, became a defining moment, a fracture in the familiar rhythm of family life that would echo far beyond the initial revelation. It was a moment of devastation, of raw emotion, of unfiltered truth, and yet, in its own way, it marked the beginning of a new understanding, a painful but necessary awakening to the complexities of love, trust, and the human heart. Her daughter's eyes had always held a depth that belied her age. From the very beginning, she noticed the subtleties of the world around her in a way that seemed almost unnatural, as if her soul had been gifted with the ability to see beneath the surface of things. She would observe people, gestures, expressions, and moods with an intensity that often left adults unsettled, and yet there was a purity in the way she perceived, a clarity untouched by cynicism or prejudice. She had never spoken openly about these observations, but they were always there, quiet and persistent, as if stored in a secret place only she could access. That morning, however, her eyes would become the lens through which a truth so harsh and devastating would be revealed that it would change the trajectory of their lives forever. The house seemed unusually quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavy with anticipation. Sunlight streamed through the windows, catching dust particles in its golden glow, making them look like fleeting stars suspended in the air. But despite the beauty of the morning, there was a tension that made her daughter's movements hesitant, careful, almost reverent. She lingered near the doorway, peering into spaces that had once felt safe and ordinary, now transformed by the unspoken knowledge she carried. Her gaze, wide and unguarded, fell upon a scene that she did not fully understand but instinctively recognized as significant. It was in that moment, standing at the threshold of innocence and awareness, that her daughter became a silent witness to a betrayal that should have remained hidden. The father she had trusted and loved, the man who had been a symbol of safety and stability in her young world, was with another woman, not in some abstract or distant way, but in the vivid, unmistakable reality of the present moment. There was a closeness between them that should have been reserved for the sanctuary of family, an intimacy that her young mind struggled to comprehend. She did not yet have the vocabulary to articulate the pain, confusion, and shock she felt, but her awareness was undeniable, piercing, and all-encompassing. The child's innocence clashed violently with the harshness of the truth before her. She understood, in ways far beyond her years, that what she was witnessing was wrong, that it violated a sense of loyalty and love she had always assumed to be absolute. There was a tension in her small frame, a quivering hesitance as if her entire being was grappling with the realization. The way her lips parted slightly, the way her eyes darted back and forth, caught in the impossible attempt to reconcile love and betrayal, spoke volumes of the silent turmoil raging within her. She had seen her father smile, laugh, and hold her mother in ways that conveyed security and warmth, and now, to see that same man share those expressions with another, someone outside their family, created a fracture in her understanding of the world. It was not just the act itself, but the subtle nuances, the small gestures that spoke louder than words, that her daughter registered with astonishing acuity. The way he leaned slightly toward her, the brush of his hand against hers, the laughter that was meant to feel intimate and private, all of it was catalogued by her mind with a precision that would haunt her in ways she could not yet name. Children often notice things adults overlook, and in this instance, her daughter's attention to detail transformed a fleeting moment into a profound revelation. She could feel the weight of unspoken truths, the tension in the air, the subtle signals of emotions hidden beneath polite conversation and social pretense. And then came the whisper. It was not loud, not dramatic, but a small, tremulous utterance that carried a weight far beyond its simplicity. In that single, fragile breath, she expressed a truth that she barely understood herself, a truth that shattered illusions and demanded acknowledgement. Her words were an innocent articulation of perception, a raw recognition of a reality that had been carefully concealed but could no longer be ignored. The softness of her voice, contrasted with the gravity of her observation, made it impossible to dismiss, impossible to rationalize away. In those few syllables lay a power that adults often take years to grasp, a recognition of authenticity, a confrontation with reality untainted by fear, denial, or compromise. The mother, witnessing this, felt her heart fracture in ways that words cannot describe. Her daughter's perception was precise, unfiltered, and brutally honest, revealing a truth that she had been too afraid to confront, too hopeful to see. The innocence of her child, so pure and untarnished, became both a mirror and a magnifying glass, reflecting the depths of betrayal and amplifying the emotional impact in ways that would resonate long after the moment had passed. There was a painful duality in this experience, the recognition of innocence in its truest form, paired with the knowledge that this same innocence was being exposed to heartbreak and disillusionment far too early in life. In the eyes of a child, there is a clarity that adults often lose over time. Prejudices, assumptions, and the complexities of social masks cloud perception and dull awareness. But a child sees with remarkable honesty, and her daughter's perception cut through the layers of pretense and denial to expose a reality that had been festering beneath the surface. The truth, once whispered, lingered in the air, heavy and unavoidable. It demanded a response, demanded processing, and demanded an emotional reckoning that would ripple through every corner of their family life. The emotional resonance of her daughter's observation was profound. It was not just a matter of witnessing betrayal. It was an awakening, a moment when the innocence of childhood collided with the complexities of adult relationships. The girl had been forced to reconcile two opposing truths: the love she had always felt and the recognition of its imperfection, the safety she had assumed and the fragility of that assumption, the fidelity she had trusted and the reality of its violation. The psychological impact of this collision would shape her understanding of trust, love, and human imperfection for years to come. Even as the mother's own heart reeled, she could not help but notice the strength in her daughter's quiet bravery. The child had not screamed, cried out, or fled. Instead, she had observed, understood, and spoken in the small, decisive way that only a young soul unclouded by adult rationalizations could. There was a wisdom in her innocence, a courage born not of experience but of inherent clarity. It was a stark reminder that children often carry truths adults avoid, that they sense emotional currents long before adults acknowledge them, and that their honesty can be both a gift and a challenge for those who love them. The scene, frozen in the mother's mind, became a defining tableau, the child's wide, innocent eyes reflecting a reality that was as harsh as it was undeniable, the whispered truth that acted as both revelation and judgment, and the fragile, trembling humanity of all involved caught in the tension. Between love, betrayal, and the unavoidable confrontation with reality, every small gesture, every subtle glance, every fleeting expression was magnified in significance, carrying emotional weight far beyond the moment itself. And as the day wore on, the mother realized that her daughter's perception had fundamentally changed the way they both would navigate the world. There was a loss of naivety, a shattering of illusions, and an awakening to truths that demanded confrontation and reckoning. The innocence of her eyes had illuminated the harshness of reality in a way that was both beautiful and devastating, a duality that would shape their emotional lives for years to come. The whispered truth, fragile yet powerful, became the catalyst for understanding, growth, and the painful, necessary journey into the complexities of human relationships and the fragility of trust. In that moment, it became clear that innocence is not weakness, nor is perception limited by age. Her daughter had seen what adults often overlook, recognized what they sometimes choose to ignore, and spoken a truth that, though shattering, was essential. The harsh reality she observed was filtered through the lens of purity, making it impossible to deny, impossible to soften, and impossible to forget. It was a revelation that would echo in their hearts, minds, and family dynamics, shaping the way they saw each other, themselves, and the world around them. The moment she understood what her daughter had seen, a cold, paralyzing wave of pain washed over her. It started in her chest, a dull throb that quickly escalated into something sharper than she had ever felt before. It was a physical ache as much as it was an emotional one, a reminder that the heart, though resilient in many ways, is not impervious to betrayal. She had trusted him, placed her faith in the love they had built together, nurtured a life with him, and envisioned a future where their family would remain intact and strong. And in an instant, that vision crumbled into fragments, scattered and irretrievable, leaving behind only the jagged edges of reality. She felt as if she were watching herself from the outside, a helpless observer trapped in a body that refused to obey. Her mind reeled, looping over the scene her daughter had witnessed, replaying the whispered words that had carried a truth too heavy for any mother to bear. It wasn't just the sight of him with another woman. It was the realization that her world, the carefully constructed safety of her home, the foundation of trust and love she had believed unshakable, had been violated. Each glance her daughter had exchanged, each word softly spoken, amplified the heartbreak, forcing her to confront the painful fact that her family's innocence had been stolen. The heartbreak came in layers, each one sharper than the last. First was the shock, that initial inability to reconcile what she was seeing with the life she thought she knew. The disbelief settled in like a storm, filling every corner of her mind with questions that demanded answers she did not have. How long had this been going on? How had she not noticed? What signs had she missed? These questions were relentless, cycling endlessly through her consciousness, a painful loop that made it impossible to find rest or clarity. Then came the sorrow, deep and consuming. It was a sorrow not just for herself, though that was undeniable, but for the innocence of her daughter, who had been exposed to such a cruel and harsh truth far too early in life. There was grief for the loss of the family she had imagined, for the dreams and expectations that had been carefully nurtured and now lay in ruins. The sorrow wrapped around her like a heavy cloak, suffocating and unrelenting, a constant reminder that some wounds are not easily healed. She felt as though the ground had been pulled from beneath her feet, leaving her to stumble blindly in the debris of a life she no longer recognized. Anger soon followed, a searing, consuming fire that roared in her chest and blazed behind her eyes. The betrayal was a violation of trust so fundamental that it ignited every instinct she had to protect, to defend, to demand accountability. She thought of the countless moments they had shared, the laughter and the tears, the simple, quiet gestures of love that had seemed so ordinary but were now tainted by deception. Anger coursed through her veins, raw and hot, demanding acknowledgement, demanding justice, demanding that the wrong be recognized and confronted. Yet, alongside the anger was the helplessness, a bitter realization that some actions cannot be undone, some betrayals cannot be erased, and some truths, once revealed, cannot be ignored. Every memory she had shared with him was suddenly reframed in this new, painful context. The small moments of tenderness, the smiles, the gestures, the whispered words of love were now tainted, seen through a lens of suspicion and sorrow. She found herself questioning not only his actions but the very essence of their relationship, wondering how much of what she had cherished had been genuine and how much had been an illusion. This mental reevaluation was exhausting, a relentless dissection of a life she had once trusted implicitly, and it left her feeling hollow, as though the foundation of her emotional world had been ripped away. Amidst the heartbreak, her daughter's presence was both a balm and a source of piercing clarity. The child's eyes, so full of innocence and truth, reflected back to her the reality she had been too afraid to confront. The whispered words that had broken her heart were not just a revelation. They were a mirror, forcing her to see what she had known but refused to acknowledge. She felt the weight of responsibility pressing down, knowing that her daughter had witnessed a betrayal that could shape her understanding of love, trust, and relationships for years to come. Protecting that innocence, offering comfort and reassurance while processing her own heartbreak, was an almost unbearable task, yet one she could not shirk. The physical manifestations of grief were unmistakable. Her body felt heavy as though burdened by the weight of 1,000 sorrows. Her chest tightened, breaths came in shallow, uneven rhythms, and her hands trembled as she reached out to hold her daughter, trying to convey comfort even as she struggled to find it for herself. Each heartbeat seemed to echo the pain, a relentless drum reminding her that life had irrevocably changed in a single, fleeting moment. Even as she tried to gather herself, to compose a semblance of strength for the sake of her child, the heartbreak lingered, pervasive and unyielding, a shadow that refused to lift. She thought of the life they had envisioned together, the laughter, filled dinners, the quiet moments of shared understanding, the celebrations of milestones and achievements. Each of these memories now carried an undertone of betrayal, a bitter reminder that the idealized world she had nurtured had been infiltrated by deception. The sense of safety and security she had worked so hard to create felt fragile and vulnerable, as though it could crumble further at any moment. And yet, amidst the sorrow and anger, there was a stubborn thread of resilience, a determination to survive this heartbreak, to protect her daughter, and to navigate the complexities of love, loss, and trust in the aftermath of such a profound betrayal. Her emotional world had become a battlefield, each feeling a soldier in the conflict between love, grief, and anger. The heartbreak was not a singular event, but a cascade, each wave crashing over her with renewed intensity, leaving her emotionally exhausted and raw. She wrestled with conflicting emotions, love for the man who had betrayed her, anger at the deceit, sorrow for the innocence lost, and determination to protect what remained of her family. This internal conflict was exhausting, consuming, and unrelenting, yet it was a necessary part of processing the truth that had been thrust upon her. Even as the hours passed, the weight of heartbreak remained. She could not ignore it, could not diminish it, could not pretend that the world was unchanged. The revelation had altered the very fabric of her reality, transforming familiar spaces into landscapes of pain and reflection. Every glance at her daughter, every sound in the house, every memory shared, carried with it the echo of betrayal. And yet, despite the raw intensity of her heartbreak, she recognized a spark of clarity amid the darkness. That pain, while devastating, was a signal, a catalyst, a moment demanding attention and reckoning. It was a call to confront the truth, to navigate the consequences, and to rebuild what could be salvaged with honesty, courage, and resilience. Her daughter, sensing her mother's turmoil, instinctively offered comfort in small, delicate ways. A hand held, a glance shared, a silent presence that spoke of trust, love, and understanding. It was a reminder that heartbreak, though isolating, does not exist in solitude. It is shared, mirrored, and softened by the connections we hold dear. The mother, even as she processed the raw intensity of betrayal, drew strength from this bond, finding in her child's unwavering presence a reason to endure, a reason to face the painful truths, and a reason to continue nurturing love despite the fractures that now existed. The moment the truth revealed itself, the very foundation of their family seemed to tremble. Life, which had always followed a rhythm of familiarity and comfort, now felt unpredictable, fragile, as though every relationship within the home had been cast into uncertainty. The walls that had once held laughter, love, and warmth now seemed to echo with unspoken tension, resonating with the weight of betrayal that had quietly infiltrated the spaces between them. Each family member, in their own way, was affected, though the impact varied in intensity, leaving a network of emotions tangled and raw. Trust, once implicit, now demanded proof. Affection, once effortless, now required negotiation. And stability, once a given, now felt tenuous, as though it could unravel at the slightest touch. The mother, still reeling from heartbreak, felt the air around her grow heavier with each passing moment. Her daughter's innocent eyes, wide and searching, looked to her for reassurance, for answers to questions she was not yet ready to answer. for guidance in navigating a reality that had been shattered before she could fully comprehend it. The child's presence was both comforting and agonizing, a mirror reflecting the depth of betrayal while reminding her that she had responsibilities beyond her own pain. She could see the subtle shifts in her daughter's behavior, the small hesitations in speech, the careful measurements in movement, all evidence of an emotional awareness that went far beyond her years. The child was adapting, processing, and responding to the fracture in their family with a resilience that belied her innocence. And yet the mother knew that even resilience has limits, especially when exposed to the harsh realities of human imperfection. The father, now aware that his actions had been discovered, carried an entirely different weight. There was a tension in the way he moved through the house, a self-consciousness and defensiveness that had never existed before. The casual ease that had defined his presence was gone, replaced by a constant awareness of judgment, by the silent observations of those whose trust he had betrayed. Each glance from his daughter, each questioning look from his wife, seemed to reverberate within him, amplifying feelings of guilt, shame, and the fear of confrontation. The dynamics between father and child, father and wife, had shifted from familiarity to negotiation, from assumption to caution, and from comfort to fragility. The small, everyday interactions that had once defined their bond now required deliberation, as if each word and gesture had to be carefully weighed against the backdrop of betrayal. Even seemingly ordinary moments became charged with emotion. Shared meals, once a time of connection, were now punctuated by silence, hesitations, and subtle undercurrents of tension. Conversations that had once flowed naturally were now interrupted by careful phrasing, avoidance of certain topics, and the unspoken understanding that the past could no longer be ignored. The simplest gestures, a touch on the shoulder, a glance across the room, a smile, carried with them the weight of suspicion, the need for reassurance, and the painful acknowledgement of fractured trust. Every interaction became a delicate dance, a negotiation between past intimacy and present awareness, between love and the lingering shadow of betrayal. The extended family, too, felt the tremors of this revelation. When the mother and daughter were in the presence of relatives, there was a subtle shift in demeanor, a guardedness that reflected the inner turbulence of their home life. What had once been casual family visits, warm gatherings filled with laughter and shared stories, now carried a sense of vigilance. Words were measured, eyes often averted, and conversations circled cautiously around sensitive topics. The network of relationships, both internal and external, had been infiltrated by doubt, leaving a ripple effect that extended far beyond the walls of the home itself. Within the mother, there was a constant negotiation between the desire to shield her child from further pain and the recognition that avoidance could no longer sustain them. She found herself observing interactions with heightened awareness, noting subtle cues in behavior, shifts in tone, and patterns of avoidance or secrecy. The household had become a landscape of emotional minefields, each step forward requiring careful consideration, each decision weighed against the potential for additional harm. Even ordinary routines, preparing meals, attending school events, handling household tasks, were now underscored by a quiet vigilance, an acute awareness that the emotional equilibrium had been disrupted and could not easily be restored. The daughter's perspective added another layer of complexity to the family dynamics. Children perceive more than adults often assume, and she was already navigating an emotional landscape that demanded understanding, adaptation, and resilience. Her whispered words had already revealed the hidden reality, and now she lived in the aftermath, observing interactions, noting tension, and responding to the unspoken cues that permeated the home. Her innocence provided clarity in some ways, yet it also magnified the emotional stakes. She could not unsee what she had witnessed, could not unhear the truth, and could not fully escape the knowledge that the world she had known had irrevocably shifted. Her responses, quiet questions, hesitations, subtle acts of reassurance or withdrawal, became part of the evolving family dynamic, influencing the emotional tone of the household in ways both subtle and profound. The emotional landscape was further complicated by the competing needs of each family member. The mother sought healing, reassurance, and a reestablishment of trust. The father struggled with guilt, defensiveness, and the desire to maintain some semblance of normalcy, and the daughter needed security, understanding, and validation of her feelings. These needs, while natural and understandable, often collided, creating moments of tension and emotional turbulence. Each individual's coping mechanisms influenced the others, leading to a dynamic interplay of emotions that required negotiation, patience, and, in many cases, difficult conversations that were both necessary and painful. The home itself seemed to reflect the internal upheaval. Spaces that had once been warm and welcoming now felt heavy with unspoken emotions. The living room, the kitchen, even the hallways and bedrooms seemed to carry the residue of betrayal, echoing with the emotional weight of events that had unfolded. It was as if the very atmosphere had shifted, imbued with the tension, grief, and uncertainty that had taken root within the family. Every glance, every gesture, every shared space became charged with meaning, demanding awareness and careful navigation to avoid further fracturing relationships. And yet, amidst the turmoil, there was a subtle undercurrent of resilience. The family, though shaken, was still bound by the threads of love that had existed prior to the revelation. The mother's protective instincts, the daughter's innocent clarity, and even the father's complicated sense of responsibility contributed to a fragile, yet persistent, effort to maintain connection. They were learning slowly that while the dynamics had been fundamentally altered, there was still the possibility of navigating these challenges, of rebuilding trust, and of finding a way forward despite the shadows that now loomed over their relationships. Each day became an exercise in emotional negotiation, a balancing act between acknowledging the truth, processing the pain, and maintaining the bonds that still mattered. The family dynamics had shifted from unquestioned stability to a delicate equilibrium, one that demanded attentiveness, empathy, and courage. Every interaction, no matter how minor, was a test of resilience and understanding, a reflection of the intricate dance required to navigate life after betrayal. The emotional ripple effect was unavoidable, touching each corner of their shared existence, reshaping the ways they communicated, connected, and supported one another. Through this upheaval, the mother realized that the fragility of family dynamics did not signal the end, but rather the beginning of a complex journey, a journey that required honesty, reflection, and a willingness to confront painful truths. She understood that the emotional turbulence, while overwhelming, was also an opportunity, a chance to address unspoken issues, to rebuild trust deliberately, and to foster connections that could withstand the storms of human imperfection. The revelation had shaken their family, yes, but it had also opened a path toward a more conscious, intentional way of being together, one in which awareness, empathy, and resilience would become essential companions in the navigation of life's complexities. The moment of truth arrived quietly, yet with a force that made it impossible to ignore. It was not heralded by dramatic words or thunderous confrontations, but by the subtle convergence of perception, emotion, and reality that had been building over time. In the stillness of their home, in the fragile space between a child's innocence and a mother's pain, truth emerged, not as a revelation to be debated, but as a reality to be felt, to be acknowledged, and to be reckoned with. It was a truth so raw, so undeniable, that it cut through layers of denial and hope, exposing the fragile foundation upon which their lives had rested. Her daughter's small voice, soft yet piercing, was the instrument through which this truth found its way into their consciousness. It was a whisper that carried weight far beyond its volume, a simple articulation of perception that illuminated the unseen. Children, in their honesty, often perceive what adults overlook, and in this instance, her daughter's observation became the lens through which the hidden reality was finally revealed. Her words were not accusatory or dramatic. They were innocent, honest, and precise, but their impact was seismic, shattering the illusions that had been carefully maintained. The mother, standing there with her heart pounding and her mind racing, felt a wave of emotion unlike anything she had experienced before. Shock and disbelief were the first to arrive, washing over her in sudden, overwhelming waves. She could hardly process the simplicity of the truth that the life she had known, the love she had nurtured, and the trust she had placed in her husband had been compromised. Every memory, every shared moment, every smile and gesture was now reframed through the lens of betrayal. The realization was both immediate and enduring, striking with the sharpness of a blade and the lingering weight of inevitability. There was a moment of suspended time where nothing moved except the invisible threads of awareness that connected mother and daughter. In that suspended moment, truth was not just seen, it was felt. It seeped into every pore, into every thought, and into every heartbeat. The air seemed heavier, charged with an energy that could neither be ignored nor escaped. The emotional gravity of the moment pulled them both into its orbit, forcing confrontation, reflection, and a confrontation with the reality they had long feared but had been unable to name. The father, suddenly aware that the veil of secrecy had been lifted, experienced the truth from a different angle. Where the mother and child felt the direct pain of betrayal, he felt exposure, guilt, and the inevitable consequences of choices he had attempted to conceal. The ordinary rhythms of life, mundane conversations, casual gestures, the flow of everyday routine, were now overshadowed by an acute awareness that the hidden had been revealed. The dynamics within the home had shifted in ways that could not be undone, and every interaction now carried the potential for confrontation, reconciliation, or further fracture. The ripple effect of this moment extended far beyond the immediate revelation. It reshaped relationships, recalibrated expectations, and demanded emotional reckoning. For the mother, the truth was a mirror reflecting her own vulnerability, her capacity to feel betrayal, and the deep love she had invested in her family. It forced her to confront questions she had long avoided. Had she been blind? Had she missed the signs? How would she protect her daughter while navigating her own pain? Each question carried the weight of reality, demanding reflection and action that would shape the trajectory of their family life. Her daughter, sensing the intensity of the moment, responded in the ways only a child can through silent observation, tentative gestures, and unspoken understanding. She did not fully comprehend the complexity of human relationships, the nuances of adult betrayal, or the long-term consequences of what she had witnessed. Yet her perception, her honesty, and her willingness to articulate the truth made the moment both undeniable and transformative. The clarity in her eyes, the purity of her intent, and the courage embedded in her simple words created a bridge between innocence and reality, highlighting the profound impact that honesty can have in even the most fragile of circumstances. This moment of truth also exposed the fragility of the human heart. It revealed how easily trust can be eroded, how quickly love can be tested, and how vulnerable familial bonds can become when confronted with deception. The mother felt this acutely, a deep ache radiating through every part of her being. It was a sorrow rooted not only in personal betrayal, but also in the awareness that her daughter's world had been forever altered. The loss of innocence, the confrontation with human imperfection, and the intrusion of harsh reality into their lives was a pain she could neither deny nor soften. Yet, even within the heartbreak, there was a strange, almost paradoxical clarity. The truth, though painful, illuminated what had been hidden, allowing for recognition, acknowledgement, and the potential for transformation. In that moment, the mother realized that avoidance, denial, and hope were no longer sufficient. The family could no longer rely on illusions or silence to maintain stability. The revelation demanded a confrontation, a reckoning, and a decision about how to move forward in a reality now fully exposed. The physical manifestations of emotional impact were undeniable. Her heart raced with tension, her body trembled with the weight of grief, and tears threatened to spill over with each heartbeat. The mind, overwhelmed by the clarity of the truth, raced through memories, reconsidered every interaction, and reinterpreted familiar gestures in the context of betrayal. The home itself, once a sanctuary, now felt charged with unspoken tension, a place where every corner, every shared space, and every interaction became a reminder of the truth revealed. Even the smallest gestures became laden with meaning. A glance, a touch, or a quiet moment together carried the weight of awareness, reminding each family member that the past could no longer be ignored, and that the future required careful navigation. The mother's protective instincts surged, urging her to shield her daughter while also processing her own grief. To find the delicate balance between acknowledging reality and maintaining the emotional safety of her child. It was a balancing act fraught with tension, requiring both emotional intelligence and immense courage. The father, confronting the truth of exposure, faced his own internal struggle. Guilt, shame, and defensiveness intermingled as he navigated the consequences of his actions. Every interaction, every attempt at communication, was now filtered through the lens of awareness, trust compromised and relationships altered. The ordinary dynamics of family life were transformed into a complex landscape where honesty, reconciliation, and accountability became essential. Every step, every conversation, every shared moment required careful attention to navigate the fragile equilibrium that had been established by the revelation. Amidst the pain, there emerged a subtle, undeniable strength. The mother drew on the bond with her daughter, the clarity of shared truth, and the resilience inherent in human hearts. She understood that the moment of truth, though shattering, was also an opportunity, a chance to confront reality, to address deception, and to begin a process of healing and understanding that had been postponed for too long. The moment, though fraught with grief, anger, and sorrow, also illuminated a path forward, a path that required courage, empathy, and an unwavering commitment to authenticity. The child, in her innocence, had unwittingly catalyzed a transformation that would ripple through the family. Her perception and articulation of truth had made it impossible to continue living in denial, forcing acknowledgement and action. The moment of truth was not just a revelation. It was a turning point, a pivot around which the family's emotional reality would now revolve. It demanded attention, courage, and care, reshaping relationships and setting the stage for the complex, often painful journey that lay ahead. Every heartbeat, every glance, every breath in the aftermath of this moment carried significance. The revelation had disrupted the equilibrium of their lives, exposed vulnerabilities, and illuminated the necessity of emotional honesty. It forced confrontation with the complexity of human relationships, the fragility of trust, and the profound impact that even a single moment of clarity can have on hearts, minds, and the very fabric of family life. It was a moment that would linger, shaping interactions, influencing decisions, and serving as a touchstone for the journey toward understanding, healing, and eventual reconciliation. The emotional ripple effect of that moment was immediate, unstoppable, and far-reaching, touching every corner of the family's existence in ways both visible and subtle. It was not a single, isolated reaction, but a wave, spreading outward from the initial revelation, reshaping perceptions, interactions, and the very atmosphere of their home. Each member of the family experienced the impact differently, yet none remained untouched. The mother's grief radiated outward, the father's guilt and defensiveness altered his demeanor, and the daughter's innocence and awareness magnified the intensity of the emotional shifts, creating a complex web of tension, sorrow, and reflection. The home, which had once been a sanctuary of love and familiarity, now felt like a landscape marked by uncertainty, its emotional currents constantly shifting, unpredictable, and sometimes turbulent. Every interaction was now colored by heightened awareness. The simple act of speaking, once casual and effortless, became loaded with meaning. Every glance carried a question, every tone suggested suspicion, and every silence was pregnant with unspoken emotions. The emotional environment was no longer neutral or safe. It demanded attention, careful navigation, and emotional acuity. The ripple effect was insidious in its reach. It spread into ordinary routines like meals, school drop-offs, and bedtime rituals, subtly influencing the way the mother, father, and daughter related to each other. Even laughter felt tempered, smiles were tinged with caution, and casual conversation was filtered through the lens of a reality now irrevocably altered. The mother, acutely aware of the emotional shift, felt herself stretched thin. She had to process her own grief while simultaneously shielding her daughter from further emotional harm. The child's awareness, so raw and perceptive, meant that her innocence could not be fully protected, and yet the mother instinctively sought to create pockets of safety, spaces where love could exist even amidst the chaos. This required immense patience, constant vigilance, and a careful balancing act between acknowledgement of truth and protection of emotional well-being. She noticed how her daughter's questions, hesitant yet probing, reflected an ongoing process of understanding and negotiation with the harshness of reality that mirrored her own internal struggle. The father's presence contributed to the intensity of the ripple. He moved through the home with a mix of shame, guilt, and defensiveness, aware that the veil of secrecy had been lifted and that nothing could remain hidden. Every gesture, every attempt at casual conversation was now scrutinized, analyzed, and measured against the backdrop of betrayal. His interactions with both mother and daughter were altered by an underlying tension, an unspoken awareness that trust had been compromised and that the emotional equilibrium of the household was now fragile. This awareness, whether consciously acknowledged or not, intensified the ripple effect, making each moment of family life more complex, more fraught with potential for misunderstanding, and more emotionally charged. Even the daughter, despite her youth, was a critical node in this network of emotional ripples. Her perceptiveness magnified the impact of every subtle shift in mood, tone, or expression. She observed not only the actions of her parents, but also the underlying emotions that guided those actions: fear, guilt, grief, and unresolved tension. Her responses, sometimes quiet and reflective, sometimes tentative and probing, became part of the ongoing negotiation of the family's emotional landscape. She processed not only the betrayal she had witnessed, but also the subsequent reactions of her mother and father, creating a dynamic interplay of observation and response that both reflected and amplified the emotional ripple effect. The home itself seemed to resonate with the consequences of the revelation. Rooms that had previously been filled with routine comfort now carried subtle tension, as if the air itself remembered the moment that had changed everything. The living room, the kitchen, and even hallways were imbued with unspoken reminders of betrayal and the delicate emotional currents that had taken hold. Ordinary spaces became charged with meaning, where even a glance exchanged across a table or a passing touch on the shoulder could trigger reflections of past hurt and current uncertainty. The ripple effect was thus both psychological and physical, extending beyond thought and emotion into the lived experience of space and presence. As days passed, the emotional ripple continued to evolve, revealing layers that had not been immediately apparent. Moments of anger gave way to sorrow, grief expanded into reflection, and tension created opportunities for dialogue and confrontation that were both painful and necessary. The ripple effect forced family members to confront questions they had previously avoided. What does trust mean now? How can we rebuild connections that have been fractured? Is reconciliation possible? And if so, what form must it take? These questions were not abstract. They were practical, pressing, and emotionally laden, influencing decisions about communication, discipline, routines, and even long-term family planning. Every choice became a response to the ripple effect, a navigation of its consequences, and a negotiation of the path forward. The ripple extended beyond the immediate household. Relationships with extended family, friends, and community members were inevitably affected, as the emotional turbulence manifested in interactions outside the home. The mother noticed subtle changes in how she engaged with others, a heightened vigilance in conversations, and a sense of protective awareness for her daughter's perception of social reality. The father's behavior similarly reflected the inner turmoil, sometimes manifesting as withdrawal, defensiveness, or attempts to normalize life despite underlying tension. The daughter's sensitivity to these shifts meant that even outside observers became part of the broader network of emotional ripples, influencing how each family member navigated social spaces and relationships. Yet, the ripple effect was not purely destructive. Amidst the waves of sorrow, anger, and confusion, there were glimpses of resilience, reflection, and clarity. The mother's deep love for her daughter created a stabilizing force, an emotional anchor that allowed them to face the challenges together. The father, despite his failings, was confronted with the necessity of accountability, a recognition that his actions had consequences that could no longer be ignored. The daughter, in her perceptive innocence, became both witness and guide, her honesty offering clarity in the midst of emotional turbulence. These moments of insight and resilience were like the counter, currents in a stormy sea, subtle but powerful, offering the potential for eventual healing and understanding even amidst ongoing challenges. Communication, or sometimes the lack of it, played a central role in the ripple effect. Every word spoken, every silence observed, became imbued with significance. Misunderstandings arose easily as emotions ran high and interpretations varied. A simple request or casual comment could trigger reflections of betrayal, fear, or grief, creating additional waves of emotional response. The family had to learn, often painfully, how to navigate these interactions, how to validate emotions without escalating conflict, and how to maintain connection while honoring the depth of hurt that had been introduced into their lives. The emotional ripple effect also revealed the fragility and resilience of human connection. Trust, once shattered, required intentional effort to rebuild. Love, though challenged, remained a constant undercurrent, providing the motivation to endure, reflect, and grow. The mother's patience, the daughter's perceptiveness, and even the father's acknowledgement of guilt became the tools through which the ripple could be managed, directed, and in time transformed into a force for growth rather than merely a source of pain. Ultimately, the emotional ripple effect demonstrated the profound interconnectedness of family life. A single moment, the revelation of betrayal witnessed through a child's eyes, was capable of reshaping thought, behavior, and emotion across multiple dimensions of daily life. It was a reminder that the heart, while fragile, is also capable of resilience, that relationships, while vulnerable, can adapt, and that truth, even when devastating, creates a pathway toward clarity, understanding, and eventual healing. Every reaction, every observation, every interaction was part of this ripple, a testament to the complexity of human emotion and the enduring power of connection, even in the midst of profound heartbreak. The aftermath of revelation is never simple. It is messy, layered, and deeply transformative, touching every corner of a heart and every facet of family life. Yet, even in the midst of heartbreak, there exists the fragile, often overlooked possibility of a new beginning, a chance to rebuild, to reframe, and to redefine what it means to be a family. This new beginning does not erase the pain, nor does it provide immediate comfort or clarity. It is instead a slow, deliberate journey, one forged through courage, vulnerability, and a willingness to face the truth with unflinching honesty. The mother, still carrying the weight of betrayal, found herself standing at a crossroads. She could dwell solely on what had been lost, allowing anger, grief, and resentment to define her daily existence, or she could choose to acknowledge the pain while seeking a path forward. This choice was not simple or linear. Every day brought waves of emotion, each one threatening to pull her under. Yet, amid the turbulence, there were moments, small, fleeting, almost imperceptible, that reminded her of the enduring strength she carried within. Her daughter's presence was central to this recognition. The child, though wounded by the same events, exhibited a resilience that inspired and guided her, showing that even in the aftermath of heartbreak, love and connection could persist. The daughter became both a mirror and a beacon. Her awareness of the betrayal, though deeply painful, also revealed an extraordinary capacity for empathy, understanding, and emotional intelligence. She instinctively sought to maintain bonds, to offer comfort, and to create moments of connection, even as she navigated her own confusion and hurt. Through her eyes, the mother realized that healing was possible not because the past could be undone, but because the future could still be shaped by conscious choice, deliberate action, and the nurturing of trust in its renewed form. The daughter's simple gestures, a hand held during moments of despair, a question asked with honesty, a quiet presence shared, served as reminders that love, though fragile, could endure, and that a new beginning was not only possible but necessary. Father's role in this nascent rebuilding was complicated. He had been the source of profound hurt, yet his acknowledgement of fault, willingness to confront the consequences of his actions, and efforts to regain trust were essential components of the family's path forward. Reconciliation did not mean immediate forgiveness or forgetting. It meant commitment, accountability, and the labor of repairing what had been broken. Every interaction required deliberate effort, transparency, and the courage to face uncomfortable truths. The mother and daughter had to navigate their own emotional responses while simultaneously observing whether his actions aligned with his words, whether his intentions were genuine, and whether the emotional foundation could be rebuilt in a way that felt safe and sustainable. The process of beginning anew was incremental. Each day presented opportunities to practice patience, to offer empathy, and to engage in small acts of care that slowly, imperceptibly, began to reshape the emotional landscape. Shared meals became more than routine. They were spaces to reconnect, to observe gestures of sincerity, and to reaffirm bonds. Conversations, initially fraught with hesitation, gradually opened to honesty, reflection, and acknowledgement of feelings. The mother found herself teaching her daughter the nuanced lessons of human imperfection, that people can fail, that mistakes have consequences, and that even in the midst of hurt, the capacity for growth and change exists. These lessons, though difficult, were essential to the formation of resilience, emotional intelligence, and a sense of security that could withstand future challenges. The ripple effect of the past did not vanish, nor did it disappear overnight. Memories of betrayal, moments of doubt, and lingering grief were constants in the household, reminders of the work that remained. Yet, the commitment to a new beginning provided a guiding framework, a structure through which the family could navigate the complexity of human emotion. Rituals of reassurance, deliberate acts of kindness, and transparent communication became tools to rebuild trust and restore a sense of safety. Even small gestures, a smile, a shared laugh, a quiet acknowledgement of care, took on profound significance, each one a thread weaving together the fabric of their renewed connection. The mother learned to recognize and honor her own emotional boundaries, understanding that healing required both vulnerability and self-protection. She allowed herself to feel the pain fully, to confront anger without shame, and to grieve the loss of the life she had once imagined. At the same time, she consciously chose to model resilience and hope for her daughter, demonstrating that life, even when fractured, could continue with integrity and love. These dual responsibilities, honoring her own experience while nurturing her child's emotional growth, required extraordinary strength, reflection, and patience, shaping both the present and the possibilities for the future. For the daughter, this period became a formative chapter in her understanding of love, trust, and human complexity. She witnessed firsthand the consequences of betrayal, the weight of honesty, and the necessity of accountability. She also observed the painstaking work of rebuilding, learning that forgiveness and trust are earned, nurtured, and continuously maintained. Through her experiences, she internalized lessons that would shape her perspective on relationships, empathy, and resilience for years to come. Her innocence was tempered by awareness, yet her capacity for love remained intact, providing both a stabilizing force and a source of hope for the family as they navigated this new phase of life. The father's engagement in this process, though tentative at times, gradually became a measure of his commitment to repair the bonds he had endangered. His willingness to be present, to listen without defensiveness, and to acknowledge the depth of pain he had caused allowed for the possibility of incremental reconciliation. These efforts were neither uniform nor guaranteed, but they signaled the first steps toward rebuilding a sense of shared responsibility and emotional integrity within the household. The family's progress was measured not by a single moment of resolution, but by a series of consistent, intentional actions that demonstrated care, honesty, and willingness to face the long-term implications of past choices. The home, once heavy with tension and uncertainty, slowly began to reflect the subtle shifts in emotional atmosphere. Shared spaces regained warmth as communication improved, gestures of reassurance became more frequent, and the family began to create new routines that emphasized connection, understanding, and emotional presence. The process was neither linear nor devoid of setbacks, but each small success, whether a moment of laughter, a shared conversation, or a demonstration of trust, served as evidence that healing and a new beginning were possible. The mother, daughter, and father were learning together that life, while altered by betrayal, could still hold moments of beauty, connection, and growth. Ultimately, the new beginning was defined not by perfection or erasure of the past, but by intentionality, awareness, and courage. It required acknowledging the pain, confronting the truth, and making deliberate choices to nurture relationships despite previous failures. The mother and daughter's bond, strengthened through shared awareness and mutual support, became a cornerstone of resilience. The father's role, while complicated by past actions, offered an opportunity for accountability, reflection, and the potential for renewed connection. Together, they were learning to navigate the delicate balance between acknowledging human imperfection and embracing the possibility of love, trust, and family in a form that was wiser, more conscious, and ultimately more resilient. This new beginning, though fragile, carried with it a promise that even amidst heartbreak, clarity, and betrayal, life could continue with depth, intention, and emotional richness. It was a testament to the endurance of love, the power of truth, and the remarkable capacity of the human heart to rebuild, to forgive, and to create spaces of hope where previously there had been only despair. The journey ahead would not be easy, but the family had taken the first essential steps toward redefining what it meant to live, love, and heal together, carrying with them both the lessons of the past and the potential for a more conscious, compassionate future.